Hello, tech leaders. I'm Palombini, founder of Palombini Consulting and Tech Leadership Expert. And this is my podcast, Tech Mind Insights. My mission is to help tech companies grow through data-driven people strategies, leadership development, and emotional intelligence. Empower leaders to walk the talk. In each episode, I interview leaders and consultants working in the tech space to bring you practical insights on the real challenges of leadership. If you want to join the conversation or have questions for my guests, send me an email or a DM on LinkedIn. And don't forget to subscribe to my newsletter, Tech Minds Insights, for even more leadership tips and insights delivered into your mailbox. And today, my guest is Sarah Greasley. Sarah is technology leader and a global speaker with extensive experience in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Welcome to my podcast, Sarah.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Sarah, could you tell us a little bit more about you and your story before we get into the DEI really specific cases?
Sure. So I started in technology 40 years ago. I worked in IBM as an engineer, an architect, working with very large companies, building complex systems. And then about 7 years ago, I joined Direct Line. I was the Chief Technology Officer at Direct Line, which is a UK insurance company. And I took them through a move to cloud and a large number of large transformations. And then joined Amazon Web Services as a technology leader across EMEA, leading the solution architects that work with AWS customers across EMEA. And I'm now in the position of following my passion, following my purpose, and moving to much more of a portfolio career.
Oh, that's amazing. First of all, congratulations. I know how hard it must have been for you to be a woman in a male-dominated space. And before we move into more practical tips that we can give to our audience regarding DEI, I want to know, how was the story from the lens of being a woman and finding this space? How did you feel that? How was that for you? Was it something easy for you to get this leadership space? Was it something that you get to go after intentionally? How did that happen?
So let me start with, I think when I started in technology, I think DEI was not yet a thing, right? And I feel that we're all much more aware today than we were when I started. I was in many respects very lucky in IBM in that I was able to start my career with a grounding as a technical specialist, right? So I had something that I was expert in, right? Which gave me confidence and enabled me to start to hold my own and to start to be seen as someone who needed to be listened to, right? So, but I would say it's only in the last 20 years as DEI has come to the fore where, and as you get more senior in some of these companies, you understand some of the challenges around DEI and some of the ingrained cultural challenges that make it really hard to grow the number of women in tech, and that's across the whole pipeline, not just people coming into tech, but actually enabling and helping to grow women across through the organization.
So as I hear it, you base your self-confidence in your technical skills. So if I am super good at what I do, if I'm an expert at what I do, I'll get the respect. And I feel that, and research shows that that's the path that most women take. Yeah. So I have to be unquestionable. My knowledge has to be unquestionable. I have to be the top talent to be heard. So otherwise, I'm not going to get the seat. I'm not going to be able to be in this position. And what I have been seeing with some of my women in tech clients is that this is also the case that can be preventing them from moving forward. Because you mentioned something just after that. So you were like the technical expert, but then you start reading the room.
Yes.
And that's the social emotional intelligence. So how was that shift for you from being like this technical mindset, this expert mindset, to a more strategic and more relationship mindset?
That's absolutely spot on. You're absolutely right. So so in 1994, I went on maternity leave. So I had my first child. And while I was away, the technology that I was an expert in was discontinued, right? So I came back from maternity leave, and I was like, whoa, right? This is my, the ground on which I, build my career is stopped, right? And I think that was the point at which I took a step back and went, I want to have a long-term career here. Technology is moving so quickly, right? There is no way, or very, very, very few people can be a specialist and grow a career in the way that I've grown a career. So that was the point at which I was able to take a step back and go, what is my value? What is my value to the organization? What can I bring to the table that is it's mine and it's grounded in my expertise and my experience, but actually will enable me to is relevant across a number of technologies as technology changes, right? So for me, that then became the basis of what we now call system design, architecture, moving from the deep technical skills to actually more about how you put it all together, how you build a system, the non-functional, the functional requirements, and kind of also bridging that business to IT gap. So that was a bit of it, had to be. So I had to have that pivot, but it had to be quite conscious. And I do believe that if I had stayed just as a technical specialist, I think there's a limit to how far you can go without growing those broader skills around, whether they are process, whether they are method, or those, or actually being able to read the room and knowing where your value is and thinking consciously about how you enhance that value.
Yes, and it's towards what you want. One of the mistakes I also see people making, women and men, is like it's believing that if you do your job now very well, if you're very good at what you do, you'll be rewarded by that, you'll be recognized by that. And that's usually a misconception. You don't get recognition. You don't move forward for being super good at what you do today. You move forward because you show people you can take the responsibilities of this following step you're trying to take. So that's what you're saying, like translating this into like emotional intelligence. Skills is like social intelligence. It's political awareness. It's understanding how decisions are made, is understanding what the next step is, what it takes to get there, and showing you can get there. It's not just about waiting for people to recognize you, but showing, advocating for yourself, which is something else women usually have a very hard time doing it. Do you also see that? Did you feel like that? Was it something that you have to overcome, or was it natural to you to showcase what you're doing and advocate for yourself?
So that's a really good question. Can I give you kind of two answers to that? So yes, I became better at advocating for myself, but I would tell you that even today, it is difficult for me to do that sometimes. Right. So it's always, it's always difficult. But what I became really good at was finding people to advocate for me. Right. And this is actually a really something that, is a tip, right? That says it's not just about having mentors, it's actually about having sponsors, so that when there are discussions in a room about someone being ready for a role or whatever, then you have someone who will go, I know a really good person who could do that role, right? So which kind of links to allyship, but actually when I look back on my career, I had some really good sponsors, right? I had people who were willing to go, yes, she knows what she's talking about, she's really good, right? Take the time to understand what her skills, capabilities are, and I am convinced that she can do the job.
I had someone doing that for me in the past as well. When I first joined HR, I had this leader in the training department HR, that completely trusted me. So he put like his whole faith in me. He gave me the trainee program, and he said, "Okay, I believe in you. You can do." And he would do that. He would advocate for me with the board of directors, and he helped me so much, not only in that company, but building my confidence to move forward. So in the end, the promotion that they wanted to give me, the company wanted to give me, was not enough for what I needed at the time, but I was confident enough to move forward in the next company to in a better position. So when we're and I loved that you mentioned how different it is to having a mentor from having a sponsor.
Yes, they are very different people. And we should, and it's and people confuse it, right? A mentor is someone who is, and I've had some really good mentors, right? So a mentor is someone who helps you to think through your problems. A sponsor is someone who is going to shout on your behalf, who is going to advocate on your behalf, and they are different people, and it's really important to have both.
Yes, and it's important strategy, and sometimes an even temporary strategy until you are like feeling confident enough to advocate for yourself. So there are a lot of levels of advocating for yourself, a lot of strategies for doing that can fit introverts, that can fit people that are more extroverted, and actually deliver your value proposition. And it's also something that people often miss. You have to know what your value proposition is, what you're bringing to the table. And if your answer is always, I'm a very good technical person, then you will always be seen as a very good technical person. You won't be seen as something else.
Yes. And I think so. When I think that, it's I can do this, I can deliver this, I can make this outcome happen, is as important as I have these skills. So both are important, but actually the that's what people are looking for, that confidence, and that often experience, but that confidence that says, I can do this.
Yes, sure. Now let's talk specifically about the DEI programs. How did that come into your life? What was your first experience with diversity and inclusions as a program?
Oh gosh. So I think that's probably, as I say, probably about 20 years ago, right? So I think all companies, the companies I have worked for have always had a focus on DEI. So and we started in IBM, and I found that sometimes I was the only woman in the room, or one of two or three women in the room, and we really felt that two things. One is we needed to understand what was happening, right? And we needed to understand what was happening, and we needed to get some data. I'm a very data-driven person, so get some data that actually tells you what's happening and why things are happening. And that really drew out some started to, and it was kind of a bit of a ground up, but with the support of senior management, we did a lot of work around where we were losing people on the leaky pipeline, right? Because so that's what we did, and really looked at the things that were holding people back. Okay, when I went to Direct Line, right, Direct Line has had a focus on DEI before I got there. Direct Line is a UK insurance company, and that focus on DEI was across data, tech, and the business, and was across all levels of the organisation. And I think two things out of that. One is you realise how the difference between being in a diverse meeting or a diverse community versus that is clearly, you see it's more collaborative, you see it's more engaged, you see people focusing on the common good and common goals rather than personal goals, for example. So that was good, and that wasn't that was not just me, that was part of a driven by HR, but actually driven by everyone top down in the organization, right? And I think that for me started to really crystallize some of my thoughts about what makes DEI successful, right? Why is it so important? And then what are some of the things that you can do about it that actually then start to increase it, right? So whether that is, whether that's about focusing on microaggressions, whether that's focusing on allyship, whether that's focusing on succession planning, all of these things are things that will help you to increase the number of women in the organization. And then, AWS also has a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that's very much about actually how do you, and again, bringing some of those, how do you build those programs? How do you actually build the allyship, and how do you really focus on not just bringing people in at the top of the organization, but growing diversity across the whole organization.
Perfect. You mentioned that there are microaggressions, and I think that not everyone is very familiarized with this term. Could you explain a little better what do you mean by microaggressions?
Yeah, so microaggressions are those little acts that of themselves don't feel like very much, but actually they make diverse people feel that their contribution is either not valued or not listened to, or actually that the organization is not really thinking about diversity. A good example, interruptions. Yes, so thank you, that's a good one. So I was going to, so there's interruptions, right? If someone is interrupting you, then you don't get the opportunity to say what you think, right? And your voice is not heard, right? We all know people. So another one is we all know people who actually are really good at kind of just pulling, really leaping in after you and kind of swamping your point, right? Either with data or by actually diverting the conversation somewhere else. Okay, so those are I think sometimes, and I've seen this, right? Saying this is what I think, and no one responds, and then a man says the same thing, everyone goes, "Oh, that's a fantastic idea," right? And you go, whoa, it's no one listening to me, right? So microaggressions over time build to the fact where you don't feel like you're being listened to, you don't feel like you're contributing, you don't feel like you're part of the community and engaged.
And what I've noticed, especially with technical people like men and women, they usually are the ones that do not complain and then just leave. So if they're feeling this amount of microaggression, sometimes people don't even notice that this is the point that they're leaving. They just say, I don't feel valued, I don't feel recognized, and they cannot pinpoint these microaggressions. That's what the name is, microaggressions. They are subtle, but they are often, it's like a small bullying. It's like you're being bullied and unheard and invisible. And that is one of the reasons women actually leave companies.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And to your point, they may not articulate it, right? And we know that women will leave without, they will get to a point of having accepted another job and already being out the door before they tell you, right? Versus actually going, I'm thinking of leaving. Can we have a conversation about it? So and it is often that it's that feeling that you're not contributing, your value is not appreciated.
Yeah, I had a client like this, like recently. She was thinking about giving up the career entirely because she was blaming herself for not being heard. Like she wanted to be heard, and she wanted to do coaching for increasing her positioning. But in the end, we just understood that it was an environmental thing, and she was taking everything as she was the one to blame. When that was circumstantial. And once she moved, and we decided, you don't have to change your career. You don't even have to change the way you communicate. You actually communicate very well. The problem is where you are now. So after that, she moved moved to a different company, and she's super happy now because now she has the environment where she feels heard and where she actually can contribute with everything she has, with all her potential. And when we don't assess these microaggressions, are we really interested in understanding the biases and the exclusion problem? Because if we're not watching the way people behave, if we're not observing the way people behave, then are we really paying attention to the environment?
Absolutely. And I think there is this thing that says there are a lot of people, particularly, I'm going to say this, some of the technical people who are so keyed up about actually making sure that they say something or they have something that they want to say, that they're not listening, right? So actually they're not listening to everyone else in the room, not even observing sometimes everyone else in the room. So and the fact is that quite often women take it more personally than men do, and that can also lead to them feeling they're not being valued.
Sure. This is part of the way that we ingrain those microaggressions, those biases within ourselves, creating all these limiting beliefs that people don't want to hear us, or that we would never be heard, or it's not worth trying to be heard. Biases, they are both internal in any individual. The gender bias, and they are external barriers, real external barriers. And we have to be able to have enough self-awareness to understand where these biases can be limiting us internally, and to be smart and intelligent enough to understand that, to have this political awareness, this social awareness of understanding where the bias is outside of our control, independent of our existence, and they are there, and we're going to face them.
Yes, absolutely. And I think building your network in any role, building your network is absolutely critical to being able to take that slightly, to take that view and and to understand both your biases, but actually the bias of the organization that you're working in.
Exactly. And that brings us to the next part of this interview. I wanted to give more practical tips about how to implement DEI programs. What are the most important aspects, the must-have steps for people who want to take these first steps into implementing? Suppose they're talking to people that have the power to implement this in the company, leaders that want to start a DEI program. What should they do, like first of all?
Well, actually, I think like many of these cultural change programs, right, it has to come from the top down, right? So it has to be something that comes from the top down. So it has to have the right level of sponsorship. It has to have the engagement and commitment from senior leadership, right? And I would tell you that it also has to involve lots of people, right? So you have to have allyship becomes really important. So allyship is where you have men men who basically support the DEI initiatives, are committed to them, and are committed to doing some of the actions that actually help to change the culture in the organization. Okay, so I think those are really important. I think communication is obviously really important. Training on those microaggressions and what those microaggressions might be and what that means is really important, right? And which comes all the way back to inclusivity, right? Whether you are in a Zoom meeting or whether you're in a face-to-face meeting, inclusivity is about enabling everyone to have a voice, right? And and so therefore, I think thinking about it, as how do I create this really inclusive atmosphere is also really important, and that comes back to culture, and that comes top down through the organization.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned this. Like, first, the sponsorship. We really want to change, and that you have the sponsor of the whole board, and everyone is in that. And communication, not just once in a while. When we talk about communication, usually leaders understand this corporate communication that goes by email. That's not communication. HR can support leaders with keywords and messaging and what they have to deliver in terms of purpose and understanding. But the leaders are the ones who actually have to deliver these messages on the daily basis. They are the ones who have to understand if their daily communications are inclusive or not. If their daily communications are hindering or encouraging microaggressions.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's really important. I think the other thing I would say is that, when you think about, so I have agonized over this. Do you have quotas or not have quotas? Right? Because I always believe in the best person for the job. But what I think you have to do is to make sure that that inclusive environment kind of wraps around this, because you don't get people apply. It's also about helping people to apply for the jobs, right? To feel they have the skills, right? Because we all know that women in particular will wait till they have 80 to 90% of the job requirements before applying versus 20 to 50%, right? So and it's that awareness that is really important, right? Whether you are the recruiting manager, whether you are a peer, whatever, but actually not just thinking who's gone put their hand up to say I can do this, but actually who can do it but just haven't put their hand up. So that inclusivity and that awareness is really important as well.
And not just for women, of course, that all excluded groups, minorities, representative minorities, but for just introverted people who are not shouting their way through, and sometimes have to be a little stimulated. You can lose a lot of talents because you just get the loud ones.
Yes. Some of the best engineering managers I have known have been introverted, and they've been fantastic at their job, particularly some of these jobs that do require an attention to detail and a real focus on some of the less exciting bits of technology, right? And they're brilliant, right? So some of the best people I know have been quite introverted. So so you shouldn't just look for those people who raise their hand and shout loudest.
Sure. I think this is an inclusivity habit leaders should have. Like one of the habits, the inclusivity habit I acquired recently is when I'm talking to artificial intelligence, ChatGPT or whatever, I ask for some references on a certain topic.
Right.
And then it usually brings us a list of white men, a very large list of white men. Then I created a habit of challenging the AI to bring me more diverse perspectives, not only from the gender perspective, but also from a lot of ethical backgrounds, different points of view. Because if we don't do that, artificial intelligence is just like mimicking our average behavior, and the average behavior is biased.
Yes. But I would I completely agree with you, but I'm just going to give you, I heard someone the other day and they said we don't need to worry quite so much about diversity because we can ask ChatGPT to give us a diverse view, right? So and I'm like, no, that's bad, really bad, because diversity is not, you can get a diverse view, and ChatGPT and AI, Gen AI is really, you can get some really different views, right? But you have to remember that often it is the sparking, it's the collaboration together that gives you something that is really unique, or it is the lived experience that gives you something that is really unique and really a light bulb moment.
You're completely right. When I am coaching a team coaching session, it's usually at the end of the session, we usually ask people how they felt and what's the biggest takeaways. And it's very often that I hear the comment that we don't know where this idea in the end, what we built, where this came from, because it was not, you couldn't place the ownership because it was a collective intelligence that was built within the session. So that's the beauty of having diverse perspective, and it only happens when you're there. When you're
Yes.
authentic and you're there
Yes.
in the experience
Yes.
and you're willing to listen.
Yes. Yeah. And you can read each other, right? Because we can all go, yeah, I'm really happy with that, but you're not really happy. So it's that, so reading the room, but it's also, intent, right? Intent. What is intent and context are the things that also make a difference and bring a different and enable you to come up with something that is what you need rather than what you might have come up with through using AI.
Yeah, but I think that in order for people and leaders to be able to actually embrace DEI as the way it is, they must also embrace a different concept of conflict, like conflict as a healthy
Yes.
thing, as a productive thing, not something that should be avoided. Usually technical people have a conflict avoidance personality. So this
Yes.
might be the thing that makes them procrastinate the decision of a DEI
Yes.
strategy
Yes.
because they are awkward and they feel awkward with any kind of human conflict. And when it comes to these very delicate themes, I think that can be a very big obstacle, a blind spot leaders have for procrastinating these initiatives.
So, and one of the things that we did in Direct Line, which was really helpful, was to focus on radical candor, right? Which is encouraging people to speak. And I was speaking to an American the other day, and they were like, whoa, the British can go, well, I'm not 100% persuaded of that, which means over my dead body. There is no way we're ever going to do that. But this, so we have coded words for them, which people don't necessarily understand. But actually, radical candor is about being clear. And that really enables people to get towards a common understanding much more quickly than skirting around the issues, trying to make out it's a different issue. I think sometimes you have to so you have to be radical and clear, but also you have to ask questions that say, what is really behind this? Well, what is your real concern? Because people often lead with a concern that's not their real concern.
Yeah, and I think that if you get into the subject and start listening like podcasts about this, and you will feel more comfortable with the strategies and with the subject, and you suddenly feel that you're prepared to put this initiative forward. So start within. If you're struggling to if you think you're procrastinating, you want to, you're consciously aware of the importance of the DEI strategies, but you're constantly procrastinating this. Take a self-assessment. Try to work that first within you, how you deal with conflict, how this awkwardness feels for you, and then move forward. Because otherwise, you will never be able to really sponsor the initiative.
No. And build your support, right? So no one should ever go into a meeting without understanding, or not a meeting. No one should, something like this, a strategy, right? You have to get people to socialize it. You have to get people's buy-in, right, before you get to the meetings, right? And I think that also for technical people is sometimes they don't kind of they think, oh, I know the answer. I've got the answer. I'm just going to come and present it, and we're all going to go, yeah, that's fantastic. Off you go. Here's your budget, etc., etc. Right? Whereas, it's also about building consensus and getting people aligned beforehand. So your supporters are ready. They know what they need to do to support you, and they are aligned. And so that's the other thing I would say is really important as you come to build these strategies.
And so, more on that personal topic here, could you tell us a story where a moment where you faced microaggression or you faced gender bias in your career, and how you dealt with it, how you overcame it, or did you overcome it?
Oh gosh. Can I? I think let me tell you about, and it wasn't so much me. It was actually around growing the next generation, right? It is very easy. I think we've all, as a senior technical leader, you often get into a situation where, you're talking about succession planning, right? It is, and much as we would, quite often it's like someone has left or someone's moving on, who's, who are the people who could take their place, right? And one of the things that we noticed from a DEI point of view was that it became very easy for people to go, oh no, she can't do it because she hasn't got this, that, or the other skill, right? And that would either be, quite often would be business orientated, to your point, business orientated skills or EQ type skills or leadership type skills. And this became a thing where you go, no, you need to right, this is not right. If you believe that she has the potential, then we should be doing this now. We shouldn't wait till someone leaves to go, oh, she hasn't got the leadership skills. We should be helping her to develop that now. So that was the being more proactive rather than having that reactive conversation where you've got, someone has left, you've got a role, and actually they're going, no, here's the skills aren't right, she hasn't got the right level of skills, right? So and that's a very subtle kind of that's a very subtle microaggression, actually.
Yes,
Because
yes, it is. It's because sometimes the person doesn't even know that she was the one that felt that was only her leader knows that she didn't get the position. She just knows that she never gets the position.
Yes, she just knows she never gets the position, right? And that's down to all of us, right? That's down to us as senior technical leaders to say, actually, let me look at the layer below me. Where are the diverse leaders? Doesn't have to be just women, but where are the diverse leaders, right? And actually, it may be socioeconomic, it may be location-wise or whatever. But where are my diverse next generation of leaders? And what am I doing to make them ready to move to the next level before I have to make some choices about who moves up to the next level? Right.
Yeah,
So
sure. How am I giving
proactive.
this? Yeah, how am I compensating years of education and oppression that left these people believing that they didn't have a place in the on the table? And how do I level the field, right?
Yes. So I think for me, one of the big things that I have learned over the last 5 years is actually this: how to be proactive around DEI rather than reactive, and actually really looking at how you can bring, you can enable everyone to be at the starting gate in terms of fulfilling their potential, right? To have the tools for their potential.
Yes, and I think that if you really want a sustainable, diverse, and inclusion culture, you have to work on this. Like, it cannot be just a one program that you put in and then you forget about it. It has to be a daily thing. You have to be working on people's habits. One of the things that I've noticed is that you might have an ally, or you might discard an ally because they have some annoying or sexist or gender biased commentaries, but they are just bad habits. And if they are aware of that as a habit, if they are aware of just repeating things that they've been saying if they know how hurtful that is, they might just quit. I believe that a portion of people will just quit if they understand that they have to change the communication, the language, the everyday language, and some of everyday's habits, like interrupting women, or not consider, or having different standards for promotions. Usually data shows that men are promoted or hired for their potential to fill that position, and women have to showcase improve that experience before they are accepted to any position. So I think that awareness, but not just awareness, is going to change people's minds. People know and they are willing to change, but they face these bad habits. They face these communication habits. If you don't face that up front, if you don't challenge people's communication, you will never break the cycle. It will always be a little toxic, and toxic enough for you to leave.
Yes, and I think but and that's where allies do come in, right? Because it can't always be you calling out that there's a problem, right? Because it then becomes people look at you and think you are the problem, right? So that's where allies have become really important. So, and maybe they take someone aside and let's say, look, your jokes are really So that's where allies are really important. So it's not just you saying it, it's they get the feeling that they are out of sync with a significant number of people, and that becomes, and then they will take more note.
Yeah, sure. So, Sarah, I'm in love with this conversation. We're getting to the end of the podcast. Do you have a suggestion for our listeners, a podcast, a book, or a YouTube channel you'd like to share?
Oh gosh, yes. So I wish I could turn the camera around and show you my book, my library, because it is quite. But so one of the things that I'm reading at the moment, is 5 Generations at Work, right? And because this is also part of diversity, is generational diversity, right? I now have children in the workplace, and my daughter in particular is brilliant. She's so, she will call out people, and she's a Gen Z, I think. So and in a way that I would not have done when I was her age, which I think is fantastic. But actually, just understanding the different generations where they come from is also really important.
Yes, I also have a Gen Z daughter. She's just turned 21 last Saturday.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
Cool. Congratulations.
Yes, and they do have a very different point of view of that. It's amazing to see the way they view the world regarding DEI perspective. Yes. It's beautiful. And I think we have a lot to learn from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's absolutely spot on, right? Just because I'm more senior doesn't mean I can't learn from her. And that's really important as well.
Yeah, that's what I always say. Certainty is the enemy of growth. If you're too certain of something, start questioning that.
Yes, absolutely. Cool. Yes, so, definitely.
Sarah, thank you very much for being my guest. I hope to have you many more times here at Tech Minds Insights. And if you listen to this podcast and you'd like to see more guests like this, please send me questions and I'll look for guests that can answer your questions. And also, click on the like button, subscribe to the channel, and also subscribe to the newsletter. It's filled with a lot of deep insights, and I'm sure you're going to like it. And I'll see you on the next episode of Tech Minds Insight podcast. Bye-bye.